let me kick us off. I have the honor of doing intros, and then Angela has the honor of interviewing our amazing guest today. So first of all, welcome to all of you to the Behavioral Science Author Series, which is brought to you by the Behavior Change for Good initiative at Wharton. So I'm Katie Milkman, in case you don't know who I am. I am the co-director of the Behavior Change for Good initiative and a professor here at Wharton. And Angela Duckworth is going to be interviewing our guest today. Angela Duckworth is also a professor at Wharton and at the College of Arts and Sciences and Psychology, and she's a co-director of the Behavior Change for Good initiative. And we are joined today by the amazing Ayelet Fishbach, a professor at the University of Chicago and author of the brilliant new book, Get It Done, which really has my favorite cover. I love that it says, forget, quit, undone, with these lines crossed through the for, QU, and UN. It's just brilliant. Surprising lessons from the science of motivation. And the book is every bit as brilliant as the cover and its amazing author. So let me pass the baton to Angela to take it away.
Thank you, Katie. And Ayelet, thank you so much for joining. Here's what we're going to do. I get to ask you some questions about this book. And then all along the way, our large audience is going to add their questions to the Q&A and upvote as appropriate. And then we'll turn around 12:25 p.m. Eastern time to those questions. And we'll get everybody out of here by 12:45 Eastern time. So Ayelet, I want to begin at the beginning, especially about this book. Why did you write this book? I think this is your first book. Why did you write a book, and why now?
First, thanks for having me. I'm excited. Why did I write a book? It may have been some mid-career crisis. I just felt like I know all these things, and it's just like a really messy room. Like there are all these ideas, and they are floating, and sometimes they connect well, sometimes not. Sometimes I forget about some. So I decided that I'm going to just like make some order in this mess, and started to organize my knowledge first to myself. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll write about it. Then I was starting to write. I actually wrote to my daughter, who commented on what I wrote, and it became a book. There was a pandemic also, but then it became a book.
There were a lot of books written in the pandemic. I have to say, I noticed. This is absolutely one of my favorites. So what would you say in Get It Done is, the core message of the book? And of course, we'll get into more than that, but what is the core message of Get It Done?
So the core message in the social sciences is that you change behavior by changing the situation in which the behavior occurs. You change the circumstances. And the way we think about it in motivation science is that you can change other people's circumstances. You can also change it for yourself. And therefore, I'm trying to figure out what are all the ways in which we can change either the situation or the way we frame it for ourselves, so that we are motivating ourselves. And many times I take intervention that we use on other people, ways we motivate other people, and to see what do we know about using that on yourself.
So either by changing the physical circumstances or the way you think about things in a way like nudge thyself, which would not have been as good a cover or a title, but a lot of our audience is very familiar with nudges, defaults, et cetera. But is that, in some ways, this book, I feel like, was written for the person who wants to change their own lives as opposed to the policymaker, trying to make cafeterias healthier, et cetera?
Exactly. And the most trivial example is setting an alarm clock. When you set an alarm clock, you're changing yourself. And you're changing your behavior. You make yourself get up in the morning by setting this alarm that will go off and will make a loud noise in the room. There are many other ways in which we can change the way we will behave by changing the situation when it occurs.
I wanted to commend you. I love the structure of this book, and there are 4 major sections, and then in each section there are chapters. But I wondered if you could give us a bird's eye view of these, 4 major approaches or areas of motivation strategies.
Yeah, so that what happened when I started to make some order in the messy room. I realized that our interventions fall into these 4 categories. The first one is setting a goal, and there is a lot of research on how to set a goal, how to think about the target, how to make it intrinsic, and so on. The second element or bucket is striving toward this goal, is monitoring progress, is sustaining the motivation as we go from point A to point B. The third area is managing multiple goals, and we never just want one thing. So how do you manage these multiple things? When do we look for compromise? When do we look to prioritize? And then the fourth area is social support. Okay, what is the role of others, both in helping us pursuing the goal when it's a goal that we have several people pursuing together, and also in supporting our individual goals just by being there and observing us, or being our role models.
So I want to pick up on something that you said at the, I guess it would fall under the first area goal strategy. So you said intrinsic. You alluded to intrinsic motivation, and some of my favorite work of yours as a researcher is quite provocative, because I think you offer a different perspective on what intrinsic motivation really is and how it's different from extrinsic motivation. So if you wouldn't mind speaking to that, and of course, for those who are less familiar, like what is the classic definition of intrinsic motivation, and then what's the Ayelet Fishbach view on intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation?
Oh gosh, the classic definition depends on and who you are. Okay,
that's true.
I think that in psychology, we agree that intrinsic motivation is doing things for the sake of doing it. And I'm saying in psychology because in economics, often this term is used to doing something that you're not being paid for. Okay, and I want to put that aside. It's not about not being paid. It's about doing something for the sake of doing it, which means that it feels right, it feels good, it in the moment. Okay, it feels like the thing that you want to do, as opposed to doing it in order to achieve something else. And there is a lot of work that looks at the contents that tend to be intrinsically motivating. My work doesn't say that it's wrong to look at the content, but I'm more interested in the structure and what makes people feel that this is the right thing to do as they are doing it. And the way I think about it, intrinsic motivation happens when you achieve your goal while you're pursuing the activity, when the goal and the means and the activity are fused together.
So say more about that, because that idea of goal fusion, right? So let me see if I'm capturing what you're saying. You're saying when something is intrinsically motivating, sometimes psychologists say like, oh, things that are interesting, that's what's intrinsically motivating, things that are pleasant or enjoyable. I think you're giving a more structural account. You're like, when it's not an instrumental, like I'm washing the dishes so that my house isn't a mess, like that's instrumental, that's not intrinsic. I think you're saying that structurally an intrinsic thing would be like, while I'm washing the dishes, if I feel like I'm at the same time accomplishing a clean house. So I'm washing the dishes, clean house, but they're fused. Is that, because it's, I think, a really profound concept, but it's hard. So if you could, double click on this.
Yes, I agree. It is hard because we don't say that getting rewards necessarily interferes with intrinsic motivation. The act of completing the goal is always intrinsically motivating. The act of achieving something that you are working on, and often by giving people rewards, we increase their intrinsic motivation because they feel that they are getting the reward as they are doing it. It makes them excited. It makes them engaged. And so we can take any goal or a mini goal, which is a reward, and when we put it on the activity itself, when you feel you achieve it as you're pursuing the activity.
So give me a personal example of goal fusion, like in Ayelet Fishbach's life.
I'm highly intrinsically motivated, meaning I find it hard to do anything that is not intrinsically motivating. One example is that I never have enough time in the day. Like when I leave work, it's always like I wish I had a few more minutes to finish what I was working on, which is a sign of intrinsic motivation, which is also one of the measures of intrinsic motivation, how much you want to engage in the activity when you're no longer required to. But in my experiments, we find that when we give people immediate rewards, they enjoy what they're doing more. They're more excited about doing it. When we direct their attention to what they get from pursuing the task as opposed to later on, okay, what they get immediately, they are more intrinsically motivating. So in one experiment, we had people either focus on the immediate pleasure or interest that they get from watching some TV show versus the later benefits, okay, what they will later know that will be useful for them in their lives. And it was a clip about the news. It was about the situation in Tibet back at the time. People that were focusing on their immediate pleasure, okay, on how much they feel like they are gaining knowledge at that time, were more intrinsically motivated. It's really the feeling that what you're doing is the right thing to do as you are doing it, as opposed
you're doing
to
it,
leading
not
to
in separate
else.
in time.
Yes. Let me give you another example. Like the old psychology often use curiosity as the ultimate intrinsically motivating activity. And I think that it was basically a historical mistake. We started the research on intrinsic motivation, finding that animals will explore their environment even when there are no rewards to explore. And so researchers have assumed that these rats were intrinsically motivated to explore. And we then became to believe as a field that intrinsic motivation is about curiosity. Well, it could, but it doesn't need to be. If we give this example in one of our papers, if you are going on a crowded flight to get to a safari trip, while you're flying, you're not very intrinsically motivated. It actually feels kind of bad. The moment you satisfy your curiosity, you solve a riddle, or you see those giraffes on the safari, this is when you feel intrinsically motivated. You are getting your reward, or you're achieving your goal as you're pursuing the activity.
I know we have another favorite example, which is Tom Brady, which feels like a timely example given where we are in the NFL playoffs, I guess, where he was sprinting back and forth in a parking lot before a charity golf tournament. And I think it was like Shaquille O'Neal or somebody said, like, Tom, what are you doing sprinting back and forth in the parking lot before we're supposed to go in and play golf? And he said, I'm winning the Super Bowl. So, this, like, while I'm doing it, I am immediately, like, I am achieving the goal. Anyway, it's mind-blowing. I think goal fusion, Google Ayelet Fishbach and goal fusion, if you want to learn more. I want to pivot just a little bit. What is the middle problem?
Oh, we jumped to the middle problem. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to go right to the middle problem.
Yeah, from the beginning to the middle. So for many goals that have a clear beginning and end, we see the people are highly motivated when they just start on something. They're excited about doing it. Every step at the beginning feels like a huge step. Okay, you are moving from 0 to 1, which is an enormous progress. Toward the end, if there is a clear end, we see again this excitement. Okay, maybe there is a graduation party, maybe there is some celebration that I'm just going to win this award that I was working for such a long time. Okay, college diploma, for example. In the middle is when we see motivation kind of on the decline, and we see that both people are working less hard, and also they are lowering their performance standards. So there is less effort, and also more just cutting corners. One of the studies that we ran on the middle problem, we had people actually cut corners. So they had 5 shapes to cut. They were on a piece of paper. We gave them a pair of scissors, and they were cutting the first shape very well, the last shape very well. In the middle, they were literally cutting corners.
Cutting corners.
Yeah.
What's the antidote to the middle problem, right? So if we have a lot of motivation at the beginning for different reasons, then we have a lot of motivation at the end, but still there's this like sagging of motivation in the middle. What's the antidote?
There are a few things that we can keep middles short. Okay?
How do you do that?
Weekly exercise goal instead of a monthly exercise goal. We can have a monthly saving goal instead of an annual saving goal. We can think about our goals for this semester as opposed to our goals for the entire time that we will pursue an academic degree. If you have like these sub goals, because these short goals, usually I know that, after this week, you would still want to exercise. You don't only want to exercise this week, but because you think about it in terms of 3 exercises in a week, okay, I know that you'll have a short meal, okay, and the next week you might want to do another thing, okay, another set of workouts. I don't know if you heard of Katie Milkman. She has the fresh start effect. That's
I have heard of the fresh start effect, and I have recently heard of Katie Milkman. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So that's another way to fight the middle problem. You just find ways to announce beginnings in a way that re-energize you to think about it as a fresh start. And when we think about people relaxing their performance standards, reminders of identity, reminders that your identity is tied to what you do, could help.
And possibly, I think goal fusion could help, right? With these, large, ambitious goals and, the tasks that it would seem to me, would goal fusion also help with the middle problem, or do you think those are just totally different?
I think it will. So I think that goal fusion will help you with whatever you do, because you feel like you want to do it. You feel this immediate rewards from doing it. As humans, we want to feel right when we do the thing. It's very hard for us to do something today in order to benefit in some future. Saying that, the concern often with middles is that they feel less exciting, and so there is less of this immediate reward of feeling that I'm achieving something, like it feels good. And
is there any downside to sub goals? Any like hidden dark underbelly of sub goals? Because the way you've described it as helping to mitigate the middle problem and also creates more fresh starts, right? So relatedly, but any downsides to dividing up big goals into smaller goals?
Probably the same problem that we often see with setting goals, or in particular setting targets, which is that they might not be the right sub goals or the right targets for the individual. If the sub goal is too easy, then people quit too soon. If it is too hard, then people give up. And also, when we set sub goals, we sometimes don't set it on the appropriate metric. Okay, we might count the number of minutes we exercise, but not actually what we do. Or maybe a more intuitive example is the number of minutes that we study instead of the quality of work that we produce while we are studying. And so every time we set these measurements, there is the risk that we might be measuring ourselves on the wrong metric. We might be using the wrong target.
Let me ask you, I think, a related question that has perplexed me for a long time, which is a plan different from a goal? I think it is, but I'd love to hear from you how plans and goals are different. And is a plan just a sub goal, right? So, so many leaders and, researchers actually talk about goals on one hand and plans on the other. Can you solve this riddle for me?
I'm not sure I can solve this riddle for you, Angela, but I can try. Okay,
you talk about it.
Then you can explain to me why I haven't. We often think about the goal as the end state. Like, this is what I want to achieve. This is where I want to be. And part of setting a goal part of an efficient goal setting is setting a goal that you can connect to a plan, that you can think about what is the course of action that will lead to this goal. Like that goals.
So the plan is the course of action that leads to the desired future state. The goal is the desired future state. The plan is the course of action to lead there. Is that right?
I believe so, but then you ask a where plan exactly, and so we have the goal, and then we have the sub goal, and then we have the means, and where exactly is the plan, and the plan. If you can envision this hierarchy where you start with like the most abstract goals, like I want to be healthy, and then I have like the sub goal that I want to work out, and the means, like I'm signing up for the gym, and so on. Below that, I don't know, I buy gym shoes. You can think about the plan as the entire hierarchy that leads to the goal, or at least this is how I think about a plan, and this is how I talk about it when I say that it's really important to set goals that are not so abstract so that you cannot come up with a plan.
So then the plan is this, like you have like a structural answer, which is like the goal is where you're going. And then the plan is like whatever it is underneath that gets you there, but it's defined in a way in its relationship to how you've, if you drew this all out, like the goal that's on top. Is that right?
This is how I think about it. Yes.
I think that's the way I'm going to think about it after this. Okay, I only have a couple questions before we go to questions from the audience. I love your research on negative feedback and failure. And this is, of course, with Lauren Esquis-Winkler, a researcher we both think is fantastic and is now at Kellogg. Why is it so hard to learn from negative feedback?
It is so hard, and it is always, when Lauren and I read our studies, we were always amazed by how hard it was for people to learn from negative feedback. We're asking them binary questions, like, what is this thing that you don't know? Okay, is it an animal or an object? And if we gave them positive feedback, they remember the correct answer 5 minutes later. If we gave them negative feedback, so whatever you guessed, you thought it was an animal, and we said, no, it's not an animal, you were wrong. 5 minutes later, people don't know that this is an object. Okay,
where logically you gave them the exact same amount of information.
Exactly. They did not do the simple learning by elimination. If this is not the right answer, then the only other answer could be right. And we spend a lot of time trying to understand what are the barriers. They are mainly emotional and cognitive. Emotional barriers, meaning it hurts, I rather not go there, I rather think that this was just a bad experience that I can put behind me and not learn from it. It's hard to also cognitively learn from failure because it involves learning by elimination. That is understanding that I learned something by learning what not to do, okay, or by learning what is the wrong answer. And we often find that people just don't bother, take this extra step, or even fail to see that there was an information there. A task that Lauren developed, which I really like, had people learn about 3 prizes, okay, 3 boxes, okay, we call them mystery boxes. One had a small reward, the other one had a large reward, and then there was a 3rd box that had a loss. Okay, meaning if you open that box, you will actually have to pay me. And we tell people that before they choose their box, we are willing to tell them either where the loss is or where the small reward is. Okay, now there is a correct answer. You should know where the loss is so that you have an equal chance to get the large or the small reward. But about 1/3 of the people in our experiments were choosing to look at the small reward, okay, or tell another person where the small reward is, basically not realizing that there was information in the loss, and this is just not bothering to think through the
the avoidance,
yeah.
Right, the avoidance maybe of the pain, and also maybe that extra cognitive step. I mean, thinking about real world situations, right? 2 mechanisms by which negative feedback can be very hard, but you also emphasize in your writing and speaking very important to learn from. Okay, I have more questions, but so does everybody else. So I'm going to go to this first question from Eamon Colvin. Regarding the middle problem, how do you balance using strategies to increase motivation / persistence versus quitting / pivoting?
So we don't want people to quit, right? We want them to persist, and I am not sure I totally understand that question.
Yeah, I'm looking at it too, and I'm like, I wonder what Eamon. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. Eamon, you can also write into the Q&A a clarification of that question, and if I misread it, then also you can let me know. How about we do this? We'll come back to Eamon. There are some questions about intrinsic motivation. Carissa writes, can rewards help build intrinsic motivation? For example, if a student gets $5 from her parents for each A on the report card, will that help build intrinsic motivation for learning?
Yes. Rewards do increase intrinsic
motivation. What a shockingly
motivation.
clear and also not very popular answer. You're saying yes, we should pay I should have paid my kids for their report cards. It's too late now, but.
Well, unless the kids might be already intrinsically motivated, there might be other ways to make them intrinsically motivated. There might be better ways. Let's make it a game. But no, I will mention a study that we ran, that Caitlin Woolley and I ran with a school in Florida, where we came to a math class, and we just brought healthy snacks and colorful pencils and music. The teachers weren't too excited about the music in the room, and the kids were more motivated to study. They attempted more math problems. They were more intrinsically motivated. So clearly external rewards, but they were immediate, and they made the whole experience of studying more fun and more engaging, and it worked. So yes, add rewards to activities, but make them immediate so that people get them as they work on the activity. And then, we know that there is a risk in too many incentives, too many rewards. So if the child is already excited by what they are doing, certainly don't confuse
leave them alone.
Yeah.
We'll move on to another question about intrinsic motivation. I'm going to go back and clarify Eamon's question, but I'll just say, if you're rewarding, and I'll ask you, if I give my daughter $5 when she turns in her report card to me, but then it's not an immediate reward, right? Because all the work she did for 2.5 months is then later getting rewarded by $5. I don't know if that would revise your advice, but that to me feels like a delayed reward for what she did for 2.5 months.
Yeah, so delayed rewards are not great for increasing intrinsic motivation. But you're raising the question of like paying for work, and we know that for adults, getting paid for your work doesn't undermine our intrinsic motivation.
We're
right?
not forfeiting our salaries, for example, just so that we can be more productive.
Exactly. So the only reason that the rewards might decrease intrinsic motivation for kids is that kids might not really know why they do whatever they do. They are still learning, and we can confuse them. Okay, when we told kids in an experiment that certain foods will make them strong and smart, they didn't want to eat these foods. Okay, we just confused them about the purpose of eating these crackers. Okay, I thought I'm eating crackers because I like them. Turn out that I need to eat them only if I want to be able to count to 100, and the kids were just concluding that these crackers are probably not good.
We'll move on, but I'll just say, like, Ayelet, that response, but also this is one reason I loved your book, because there is nuance in your book and there's clarity. So I agree. And I think there's a simplistic view of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation that you magically, marvelously transcend. So here's one other question from Sari, and then we'll go back to Eamon's, because I think I understand his question a little better from these notes that have been added. Sari asks about intrinsic motivation. How can parents and teachers do a better job using the concept of developing intrinsic motivation? I mean, is there anything else that you would say in principle, right? That, not to be afraid of extrinsic rewards at all. Like, it's not like they're categorically bad, meteor wars, anything else, as a mother yourself, or to me, I've got a 18 and 20-year-old, anything else as advice on motivation and intrinsic motivation?
Yes, so we want to make studying rewarding in itself. We want to make the child excited about studying, and we can add rewards, right? We can make studying into more of a party. Okay, they're just more outside of the materials itself, things that get attached to it that feel good. We can also direct the child to find what they enjoy about studying, what's their favorite way of doing it, what might be their favorite topic. And we also do it for ourselves, right? We try to find the best way, the most immediately rewarding way to do whatever we do. And we can also focus on in the task that we are doing about what we like about it. So, we intuitively ask our kids, what do you like about this book? Okay. Also, what do you like about this math unit? Okay. What was interesting about it? And you might get the answer that, that was awful. Like, I didn't like it at all. But
Nothing.
Right. Like, not like, it's like asking a child, what do you like in school? And they tell you recess. And they say, okay, but there were a few other things outside of recess. What did you like? Okay, just getting kids and getting ourselves to think about what did we like, what did we find rewarding. But I know I might be taking a lot of time with this answer, but I also want to say that it is often important to understand that liking and feeling intrinsically motivated is not going to be immediate, right? And well, I should not explain that to you, Angela, because you know about grit a thing or two, but it often takes some time to discover your passion, to discover that this is the thing that you will enjoy doing. And we can certainly encourage our kids to understand that it might be hard before it's fun. And so we do need to give things a chance. We do need to struggle in order to find our passion.
Okay, that is a great transition, it turns out, to I think what Eamon was really asking about, which is, you talked about the middle problem. I think what Eamon is asking, how do you know when, your motivation is flagging and you notice it? You're like, wow, I don't really feel as excited about this work as I used to. How do you know whether you should do A, like I should use some of the Ayelet Fishbach strategies, sub goals, fresh starts. I should do something to increase my motivation and grit it out. Or B, I think my body and my mind are telling me to quit. So how do you know when to grit and when to quit? And I think that is the spirit of Eamon's question. Clearly there are upsides to quitting, there are costs to quitting. So let me ask you that question, Ayelet.
So this is hard, okay? And we know that sometimes people take on the wrong goals, okay? There are extreme diets, okay? There are extreme exercises. There are things that people take on and they really shouldn't, or they should know where to quit. When we look at some of the research that I got involved in with aging, at a certain age, we need to give up on certain things, in particular in the context of pursuing multiple goals. We need to reprioritize and say, well, I can't have everything that I had so far. I need to give up on some. There is no magic answer to how to know when to quit. It often requires do some analysis of your life and what you can fit in there, what you cannot. And going back to my previous answer, it's important to realize that for many of the things that we do, we will not know whether it's the right thing for a while. Okay? We recently did a study with the Second City Improvisation Club here in Chicago, and we found that when we tell new students that their goal is to feel uncomfortable in the class, they're doing better, they're more motivated. Now, what did we do by asking you to feel uncomfortable? Well, basically now when you feel uncomfortable in your first class, it's not a very comfortable feeling to do improvisation for someone who's never done it before. You feel that this is the appropriate response. Okay, it feels right. Okay, this is how I should feel in my first class, and I should do it a few times. And if I always feel discomfort, then maybe it's not the right thing. But there's also a good chance that after a few times, that will feel more natural. I will be more excited. There will be more of the positive feeling from doing improvisation in this case.
That's a very recent paper, I think, and I love it, especially the improv study. Okay, so Einav Hart asks, and first says, thank you, Ayelet, for a fascinating discussion. Could you, Ayelet, perhaps talk about differences between goals and sub-goals, how they relate to goal fusion? So I take it that this might just be, more appetite for maybe practical advice about how somebody can think, okay, I have these goals, okay, I have these sub goals or plans, how do I get more of this Tom Brady like goal fusion? Is there a like cognitive trick to all this, or any other way that somebody who feels like their goals are not very fused can get them to be more fused?
I think that it makes more sense to think about how to increase intrinsic motivation than how to increase fusion per se. And the reason is that we often experience this fusion where really the sub-goal and the goal have this very strong connection. There is no other sub-goal that leads to that.
Yeah, actually, if you could tell us, I think you have 4 ways in which, things like these 4 channels or something by which, the goal and the sub-goal can become closer together. And you're about to talk, but I'd love for you to talk about all of them, all 4.
Yeah, that's a lot, Angela.
It is. It's like a final exam.
I'm
I
like,
think I could feel that we're working on this together, right? So I was like,
yeah.
I think I could do it, but you go.
I think that Angela just asked me to give an answer that would usually take 1 hour in 2 minutes. So I'm like freezing.
That is about
here,
how much this will be our last question, probably. Go ahead, try it.
So you will have greater fusion when every time you pursue the activity or the sub goal, you experience achieving the goal. Okay, when they just tend to co-occur. You will have a greater experience of fusion when there is no other goal that is served by the activity. Also,
so there's no other way. So non-substitutability, right? Like I have to do this in order so that I can't do, A, B, or C. Like it just has to be this. This is the only way that I can achieve this goal.
Yes, which is where I'm saying that fusion should not be an end in itself, because the person that can only feel like they work out when they run has really strong fusion between running and working out. Okay, like feeling fit for them means running. There's a cost for this, right? Like if they cannot run, it's really hard for them to find the substitute. If the circumstances change, they are not flexible. So it might not be good, but when they run, they feel great because this is for them the experience of being fit. Okay, the goal is highly fused. So this is like a goal that is only served by one activity. There is also if you only have one goal connected to this activity. So if in this example, if you only run in order to feel fit, which again, the downside for this, because if you also run in order to run with me and we can, I don't know, gossip while we do that, that's an added benefit. But for in your mind, like running is just for fit, that will create greater fusion. If the reward is delivered earlier, if the goal is delivered earlier, I'm going back and forth between reward and goal, and I don't want to confuse them, but we often think about rewards as mini goal, because it's more immediate goal. And whether
I wanted to,
if it's, sorry, the sooner it gets, the more intrinsically motivated you feel.
And then tell me if I have this wrong. I think the last thing I was thinking of similarity, like the more the goal and the action are similar, right? Like as opposed to like, oh, I have to fill out this paperwork so that I can get tenure, and it just feels different. Like paperwork being an academic, but the more similar it is in your mind, the easier it is for there to be goal fusion, which, as you've pointed out, isn't always the best thing, but if you're looking for goal fusion, is that right? Similarity?
Yeah, so Angela gave you the fourth. The example that I used in my book is about learning a language in order to relax. It just doesn't feel right. Okay, there's no good fit between
Not for
learning.
me.
Yeah. So like if this is what you do to relax, you might find it harder to be intrinsically motivated or to have this experience of fusion. Hello, Katie.
Well, Katie appearing is the temporal cue that we're coming to the end of this conversation. Yeah, I just want to say that while we were having the conversation, I felt like I was becoming a better behavioral scientist. So I've had a very fused experience. Terrific conversation, terrific book. I'll let Katie take the mic from here.
Every conversation with Ayelet is a treat, and I always feel that way. And it was really fun to be a fly on the wall for this one. And I should say, the conversation I love with Ayelet will be featured in my newsletter coming out next Tuesday. So I'm excited about that. This was wonderful. Okay, my job is to
thank you. Hey, thank you, Angela. Thank you, Katie. I will not say anything else.
You're welcome. We love you.
My other job is to tell you what's next, which is that we are hosting another behavioral science authors event on Friday, February 4th, again at noon Eastern. And we will be speaking with Ayelet's colleague from the University of Chicago, economist John List, about his new book coming out on February 1st, which is called The Voltage Effect. So we hope you will join us for that event too. Yeah, I have my voltage effect. It's like right behind it on the shelf. Good job, Angela, with the product placement. Please
feeling very Vanna White, and like two great covers that match, by the way. I don't know if that was intentional, but I'm just saying.
Good together. I'm feeling okay. Then I have to go grab my voltage effect and be like, yes, two great covers. Okay, so much fun. So many great books that are written by behavioral scientists. We hope you love reading them and hearing us interview these folks, and that we'll see you again in a few weeks. Thank you all. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Ayelet.